was gonna say this to Sam. I saw so many games online, but I saw like huge big advantages and games literally lost out of. I don't know if it has to do. Like I don't know if you saw some games that, for example, play lately, and I was one thing I was like point of advantages of 2 points, 3 points, and they were lost.
Which games?
For example, I saw one Lanier versus
the elite ones. Yeah, no, I haven't been watching them. It makes me sick to my stomach that they didn't invite me, so I'm just not watching.
Oh yeah, no. But then I saw some other game also from the other tournaments, and I don't know. I'm like, how's this happening? You know?
Well, I can tell you, it's a lot easier at top level to defend than it is to attack.
Yeah. Of course. Yeah, I agree with that.
That's a big part of it, I would say. But
do you think? I will ask you this. Do you think your level, if you play online, you probably has to be related that you might be stronger just when you play literally facing the board that online?
I know for me, I'm much stronger head to head than I am in online stuff. It just doesn't feel nearly as serious, and I can't take it as seriously. I don't know, and I don't register the board as well. I don't train online. I train with a real board. So, but that's just because I'm, old-fashioned and from a different century, and now all these younger guys are.
No, I feel this. I feel the same like that too. But then I was thinking maybe this could have been a situation for some players, and they don't really play up to that level. Maybe because they do the same thing, like board to board.
There's a lot of blitz junkies out there who are like good at blitz and not very good at, and play on the internet all day long, and they're not even that good at blitz face to face, but they're good at internet stuff. I mean, I don't know. Those guys are probably as good as I am.
Okay. I was thinking because maybe you will also get more tired when you're on the screen. So that makes sense. Okay, guys. Okay, so I'm gonna let you guys go. I think we already have players over here. We have Caitlin and Connor.
Yeah, I can see people are drawing on my screen. If you're gonna draw, at least draw something intelligent. What's that supposed to be? Pikachu or something?
Okay, guys, I'm gonna let you go.
You can turn off annotation, Sam.
How do I do that?
So where you have that bar near the top of your screen, when you share a screen, it gives you like an option. I don't know. Let me see. Here, actually, if you make me a co-host, I can turn it off for you.
It's okay. I'll just yell at people to do that. All right, guys. So welcome. Coach Logan sent me some games for us to look at today. So the first one I have is, it looks like Amitai against Warren. So hopefully this will be an interesting game. Let's share screen. Hopefully, can everybody see me, see the board, and hear me? Yeah. So the same routine will follow. If I'm going to try to ask you guys questions about the games and stuff, you can type the answers into the Zoom group chat so that we can interact. So we have an interesting game here between, I guess, Amitai and Warren. So it starts off as a Smith-Morra gambit, which I think Black should take this pawn, and I don't think White gets enough compensation for it. But if Black really wants to decline the gambit, he shouldn't play d3, because then White gets to keep all of his space in the center and get some kind of Maroczy bind. If Black wanted to decline the gambit, he could play knight f6, and this will transpose to a c3 Sicilian after e5, knight d5. So following c3, d3, and now bishop takes d3, the problem that Black is going to face is exactly this, that White gets this pawn formation on c4 and d4. Who knows what this pawn formation is called? Give you a hint. It's named for a Hungarian. Who knows what this pawn formation is called? Type your answer in the chat. Okay, so this is called the Maroczy bind. These pawns are gaining a lot of space and controlling the d5 square, and it's very hard for Black to break this down. Broadly speaking, there's two ways that Black can get out of a position like this one, where White's pawns are controlling the center like that. One is he can trade a bunch of pieces so that the space advantage doesn't matter. And 2 is he can attack the space advantage at the source with a move like d5 or b5. But as soon as white brings a knight to c3, and we think how likely is it that black will be able to play a move like d5 or b5 when white is currently controlling those squares very, very heavily and black is not, we realize that black is sort of doomed to lose that fight. So there followed e5, and this I think is a very bad sign because now black will never get d5 in under any kind of circumstances. And here I don't love bishop g5 from white. I would prefer to just castle. The problem with bishop g5 is after this bishop gets hit, it doesn't have a great place to go because here this bishop ended up on this square where it's pretty passive and blunted by the pawn on e5. I would think white could have simply castled with a very good position. So, but in any case, there follows bishop g5, and black, I think, was correct to take these risks and open the king a little bit, just because if black didn't take any risks, the position was going to be deeply unpleasant. So there follows bishop g4, queen c2. And now bishop takes f3. This is an excellent decision, and queen c2 is a mistake. Why is bishop takes f3 a good move? Somebody tell me. Can people hear me, or I don't know why nobody's responding to anything I say?
We can hear.
Okay. Oh, I see. People are still playing. That's why.
Some of them are still in the online one, but
okay. So essentially what happens here is we have, after g takes f3, we have a bishop that I wrote about in Small Steps to Giant Improvement. Essentially, this bishop is permanently stuck out of the game because it has no way to break down this pawn chain on e5, but it also can't reroute anywhere. It can't get back to the f2 square because this f2 pawn is in the way. The f2 pawn can't move to the f3 square because the f3 pawn is in the way, and the f3 pawn can't advance f4 because the pawns on g5 and e5 hold it down. So basically, white is almost down a piece here because this bishop is so incredibly bad. And already, I think black has turned things around and has a good position. So bishop e7 is fine. Knight b5, and now black gave queen a5 check. That's fine. Knight back to c3, and it seems like white has misplayed this very badly. But now I really don't like castling from black because I think that white will have a chance to launch an attack with h4. So the question becomes, where should black's king go? I think that black should probably, I'm debating, there's three things I could see for this king. One is he could walk king f8 to g7 to sort of like be on the king side, but at the same time be sure that if white plays h4 and opens the h file, black's rook is already on h8 to challenge it. Okay, who's singing? I'm gonna go full Shrek on you. Stop singing! It's no wonder you don't have any friends. But, that was one of my favorite movies when I was a kid. Yeah, but no, here, that's one option. Another is to leave the king in the center. So for example, black could play something like bishop d8 to try to activate his bishop and argue that the king on e7 will be extremely well placed where it's guarded by all its pawns and is keeping the d6 pawn intact. I think this is what my instinct would be to try to get the king on e7. But he could also consider castling long here. But I really dislike castling short. I think up till now, apart from the opening, black has played very well and has a very good position. But now that he has castled kingside, after h4, his king is going to really feel some pain. And we even see that black felt the need to play g4 directly. Now, not only does this lose a pawn, but this also frees the bishop on g3, because now white has a clear plan to play f3 and bishop f2. And as far as I'm concerned here, black has already lost. I think that losing a pawn and freeing the bishop was a very bad sign. If black had instead played something like bishop d8 and met h4 with, say, rook g8 to keep g5 protected at all costs, this should be very good for him. Castle long also looks good, but castle short feels like it's castling right into the attack. After h4, I think maybe black could have avoided g4 somehow, but it's very dangerous for the king to be open. Still, if you play something like king g7, I don't think this can be that bad because it's very hard for white to get to the g5 pawn. For instance, after chop chop, you cannot play queen d2. What's wrong with this move? Somebody tell me. Yes, Chris Tadona. Knight takes f3 check, and the queen is lost. Now you might say, okay, fine, queen d2 is a blunder, and it is, but it's not so easy to find a good way for white to proceed here to organize his pieces. I mean, my instinct would be he could try something like king f1, so that maybe he can play queen d2 next and argue that his king will be good on g2, and hope to play something like king g2, queen d2, and then double rooks on the h file. But for example, after say rook h8, king g2, rook h1, queen h1, and black's other rook comes to h8, I think it's pretty clear that black won't get mated here. He looks reasonably safe to me. And if queen c1 or something to attack this pawn, it looks sketchy, but I think I can get away with king g6. I certainly don't see any way for white to punish this. And at some point, this bishop on g3 being such a dunce will mean something. So, but instead, after g4, I think black's position is now very bad. So f g4, knight g4, and I guess this was just a blunder, and now white is a clean piece up. So I don't really have anything further to say on this game. Yeah, okay, that's the end. That's an extra rook. All right, so unless there are any questions on this game, I would like to move on and see the next one that Coach Logan sent to me. Give people a moment. Looks like no objections, so we're going to stop the share, get rid of this game, and move on to the next one. So looks like here we have a very short game, so this one won't take too long, but maybe we'll find something interesting to discuss. So this game starts off with an Italian opening where white plays knight c3, which is probably not very challenging because it doesn't really fight for the d4 square, but it looks like white won very quickly, so we'll see what happens. So keeping symmetry should be fine for black, as we're seeing here. Bishop g5, I think h6 is fine, yes. Chop, chop, knight d5, the queen has to come back to d8, but now white has lost the bishop pair and could end up worse very quickly if he's not careful. Okay, but castle I dislike. I think this is potentially castling into an attack, and I would suggest that black should instead develop with bishop e6 to challenge this diagonal, and potentially he can look for something like queen d7 and castle long next. Castle is probably okay, but this move g4 is mildly concerning. While if bishop e6, I think black has a very comfortable position no matter what. So after castles g4, it looks like white really wanted to go for it here, which I can sympathize with, but I'm also not super convinced at how good this is. So let's see if anybody can figure out what a good move for black would be here. It's actually not an easy question. This attack is much more dangerous than I gave it credit for at first glance. G5 is not messing around, but just wondering if I can. I see an interesting try that I think might be worth doing for black. So my instinct here is to take on g4, as was played in the game. But after rook g1, now I believe that bishop f3 loses, and I'm curious about the move h5 instead. With the point being that if white tries to play h3 in order to blast open the g file at all costs, now that due to the inclusion of h5 and h3, black can block the g file again with bishop g4, and now he is winning because white is not in time for hg as this breaks the pin. And I'm not sure what's happening after knight g5 though, because this still looks extremely dangerous for black, but I believe that I'm okay after knight d4 because if h3, what does black play? See if anybody can find a good move here. You don't need to raise your hand, guys. Just type in the answer in the chat. To Emi-tide, that's possible, but then white's going to be able to castle queenside. And I think as soon as that happens, the attack becomes extremely dangerous. I think black has a better move. Okay, so Josh Price has suggested the move I was hoping for, which is queen takes g5. So black is starting to exchange pieces in order to avoid mate, and after queen takes g5, knight f3 check. For example, after king e2, knight takes g5, and h takes g4, we have a situation where white is down a pawn, and I don't really see a ton of compensation. For example, black could consider h4 here. He will lose c7, but he might not care that much. But my instinct is to play c6 because if knight e7, there will follow king h7, and now maybe rook h1 is annoying here, though. I was thinking of gh5, knight h3, and black is much better because he will get the knight to f4, and then all of his pieces make perfect sense. Maybe black should keep the king side closed at all costs with h4. A position like this one, I think, should be very nice for black. Material has been equalized, but this pawn on h4 is fantastic, and it will be very difficult for white to keep track of it. So so this would be my instinct as to how the game should proceed. But you have to be careful. There's ways that this could definitely go wrong. If you play knight f3 check, for example, which I think some people were advocating after take, I have a feeling this is going to fall apart. Which I don't immediately see how just yet, but maybe like rook g3, and I don't know where this bishop is going. This is a good start. And this looks very difficult for black. So, but I think this move knight d4 should keep things under control. Instead, black took on f3, and I believe here he's now checkmated by force after queen takes h6, because the threat of mate on g7 is very powerful. After g6, white played knight c7, which undoubtedly wins, but I believe he has a more forcing continuation. What should white do here? See if you can find checkmate in 2 moves. So Josh, how will the game continue? Yeah, okay. So rook g6 check is made into after either knight e7 or knight f6 with a discovered double checkmate. Knight takes on c7 as played is almost certainly winning as well. But it's not quite as precise because after knight e7, maybe black can live to fight another day. Still, I mean, white should be dead winning here after. There should be something. For example, even if we go grab this rook and then grab here, and if absolutely nothing else, I can go take this bishop back on f3 with 2 extra pawns and black having a wide open king. So undoubtedly white's still winning, but yeah, I don't know why he wouldn't play the mate in 2. Yeah, so g6, rook g6 would have won, but instead after knight c7, black took back, and then rook g6 was checkmate. Okay, so interesting game. I'm just curious what the evaluation was after h5. Apparently Coach Logan says that this was the way to defend, but I'm curious, so I'm going to add an adult opinion and see what it has to say about this position for black, which looks dangerous, but maybe like he can hang on. So apparently bishop takes g4 is fine, but after rook g1, h5 is important, and if knight g5, Yes, knight d4 is strong, h3, and apparently here queen g5 wasn't best, but you know, it's good enough for me. Anyhow, good game to Mahima and Abel. Abel, I think you could have taken the pawn and gotten away with it a little bit better if you had played h5 instead of bishop takes f3, but still very interesting and well worth going over. Okay, so with that in mind, I think we can move on to the next game that Coach Logan has sent me. So that's going to be Elliot against Josh. So we have here a game that starts with a Sicilian dragon. So that always leads to fun chess. It's very dangerous for black, but you know, maybe not the worst. So bishop e3, bishop g7, f3, knight c6, queen d2, bishop d7, and I really do not like this move. Why is bishop d7 not a great decision? So Coach Logan is saying it blocks the D file. Yeah. So basically, here there's three ways that that this bishop on CH can come out. One is you can play bishop D7 as Black did. Another is you can take on D4 and play bishop E6. And finally, if you get the move D5 through, which is one of the main variations of the dragon, then it can come to somewhere else. And basically, there are situations where bishop D7 is best, but it's inflexible here. You know that you want to castle, but you don't yet know where this bishop belongs. So for example, after castle and castle here, I strongly believe that black's best move is d5, trying to break down the center of the source, and that bishop d7 is not great. If white plays bishop c4 here, now d5 has been forever prevented. Black's not particularly concerned, is not really able to play bishop e6 very easily. So in this position, once white has committed to bishop c4, and you go bishop d7, now it makes some sense. And black is ready with like rook c8 and knight e5 to challenge the c4 bishop and try to land a knight on c4. And that makes a fair amount of sense. But if white has not yet committed to bishop c4, he doesn't really have to waste time moving it. And so here it seems like black just wanted to avoid castling for as long as he could. I guess he was hoping not to castle into a kingside attack, but I don't know, playing a Dragendorf with your knight already on c6 does not feel like a recipe for success. So there followed g4, b5, and now here, white played knight c e2. And I do not like that move one bit. I think this is passive and going in the wrong direction. Let's see if anybody can tell me what a better move might be. Yes, Josh, that would be a good move. So I don't think that white is particularly worried about this knight getting kicked. For example, he can go h4. And now if black plays b4, the knight will be quite nice on d5. And white doesn't mind exchanging off all these pieces. For example, if we do something like this, I mean, here white might even be able to take as an in-between move. Now already the b4 pawn is falling, and white's ready with bishop d4 or h5 to trade off the long bishop on the long diagonal and get h5 through. And this looks like things are starting to go very, very wrong for black. I don't know, maybe you can take d4 first, but then bishop d4 comes and you can't take d5. I mean, I don't think I'm particularly worried about b4, and white should be pushing ahead with his attack. I guess black can try h5 here. I mean, I can't think of any other really sensible move, but after something like g5, I don't know where this knight wants to go. I mean, probably it should go to h7 so that it can reroute to f8, but like after knight d5, like we're threatening to smash in on the b6 square very quickly, and black's knight is so backwards and white has all the extra space, and this is very, very unpleasant. But knight c2 I think is a way too fearful move. I don't know why you would be so scared of something happening to this knight on c3 when it easily has the d5 score, but at this point I think black should be okay. For example, he could play queen a5. And the thing about the dragon is a lot of people think of it as an attacking opening, and Sure, there are some games where black is able to break through on the queen side, but it's pretty rare. I don't think the dragon is really an attacking opening. I think it's an opening that says, look, all of my pieces are on good squares, all of my pawns are perfect, and you have to come and mate me, because if you don't, your position is not going to be very good. And black just sort of plays inevitably, thinking that, oh, if the game just goes long enough, I'll get a good end game or something. That's or very good end game even. I think that's sort of the general philosophy of the dragon. And here, after queen a5, black is able to get the queens off the board, which is almost always in his favor. As here, I don't think he's remotely concerned about any kind of attack from white, and his pieces are all on very good squares, and black looks extremely happy to me. I certainly don't see any problem with his position. So I think I would have probably taken this opportunity to play queen a5 and get the queens off the board, but let's see. So black instead castled, and now white probably should throw h4. He did, and there followed h5. Sure. So and now white went for bishop h6, and it's not necessarily a bad idea, but if you play bishop h6 and sacrifice this g4 pawn, you better be darn sure that you're giving checkmate, because if you don't give mate, you're going to be completely lost. Now, maybe white's giving mates, but it looks dubious to me. So black played rook c8. I guess it would be too scary to take on g4 after like h5. This looks, I don't know. I mean, if you play the dragon, this is sort of what you're signing up for, to get a position like this one. And I don't know, maybe black's just winning, like after chop and chop, maybe black can just say, hey, no checkmate, no checkmate, but I don't really believe it. Here, check, here, knight f4, threatening, queen takes g6, and this looks very, very dangerous. I mean, black can, I guess, play rook g8, and here, I mean, any number of things look good for white, but to me, the most natural would be to take and play e5 when this knight is kicked and e6 is on the way, and this looks extremely scary for black to me, but I don't know. Maybe he is okay. Maybe he can sack the queen or something like this. And he does have some pretty good pawns, but I have a hard time believing. So I guess it makes sense that black didn't want to take on g4 and instead played rook c8, but this also feels like the attack should be very powerful. So bishop g7. And now white went knight f4, which I don't think is a bad idea, but I do think is the wrong time. I think we should first take on c6, because when you play knight f4, you're letting black potentially take on d4 and then play e5 to win a piece, which looks potentially problematic. But let's suppose we took on c6 first, and then after I guess bishop takes c6. So maybe now we can play knight f4 when there's no major threats, and some position like this one looks very dangerous for black. I mean, maybe he can survive, but it looks super dangerous. You could also go knight g3 and then h5. I mean, I don't know. I'd be scared of playing a position like this one, but maybe that's just because I'm an old man. In any case, here we went take, and now knight f4. And I think this is a mistake, as now white's queen will be dragged to the d4 square, which is not where she wants to be. She wants to be on d2 so she can go to h6. So after hg and then h5, black correctly took on d4, as now white's queen is dragged away. And here I don't think that white has such a dangerous attack anymore. And in fact, black is even able to fight for immediate material gain with e5. And now white's attack should fail because black can give back some of his extra material whenever he wants to. And this queen also is a long way from getting to h6. So for example, if queen f4, trying to get to h6, I would imagine knight takes h5 is good. And I don't know, maybe white can get some material back, like after queen, I don't know, somewhere. Maybe he can't even, but the thing is, I'm pretty happy to give this bishop away on d7 to gain some time. Like, for example, after queen d2, if black just goes g takes f3 and says, okay, fine, go take my bishop, let's play this endgame, I think black is going to win very easily. He doesn't need to worry about keeping all of his material, just keep a little bit and then stop the attack. And so I think that things are now have turned around, and that knight f4 and h5, while not the wrong plan, was the wrong execution, and that white should have exchanged on c6 first to keep his queen on d2. Because here, this is not looking good. After hg, and now queen c7 looks like a very powerful move, and it seems like white I mean, white had to try to keep the queens on the board, but I think it's very clear white's completely out of steam at this point. He cannot play e5 because of queen e5, and black is ready with rook h8 whenever he wants it, and this should very easily win for black. Well, once the endgame was reached, white promptly resigned. Okay, so interesting game. I think that it was not played super well, but that's very normal with the dragon. It's very, very rare to find a well-played dragon game just because these positions are very complicated and very difficult even for grandmasters to play. Again, I think white's biggest mistake was this knight f4 move and then playing h5. I think he should have taken on c6 first before going on any kind of adventure like that. And well, this was very interesting, but I also didn't love knight ce2 from white. But this is also one of these positions where it's clear when white plays knight f4 that his plan is to try to undermine the defense of the h5 pawn as if he were to take h5 directly, which also is not a bad move, by the way. This looks very sensible for white as well, to open the g file. And I mean, he might even be able to play like knight f5 check now, and this king is really going to get torn open. But basically the point is black is able to take back with the knight on h5 to keep the position closed. With knight f4, you're trying to prevent him from doing that, but this knight, instead of coming to c3 and f4, could have gone to d5 to get rid of that knight, and then gh5 would be easier to get through. So interesting game. The dragons always are, but it looks like...
Sam?
Yes.
Sorry, one question I had earlier before pulling out. You mentioned that bishop d7 was... you felt castling was more of a given than bishop d7, but in those types of positions where black leaves his king in the center, how can white organize pressure against it? Because I feel like an English attack is set up for g4 and h4.
It depends. In general here, the first thing I would point out is that if black wants to leave his king in the center, then knight c6 is very out of place. And he should be instead trying to play some kind of Dragendorf, like play something like a6, queen d2, and say h5 to stop bishop h6, stop g4, and then go for like knight b d7 and b5. And then I don't really believe in these positions, but this is an interesting try.
Should white be trying for a4 in those types of positions?
It depends. So I like flexibility. So for example here, I like the move bishop e2, because now if black were to play b5 prematurely, you can immediately smash with a4. And white can castle kingside and open the queenside and play very strategically and say, look, black, you're behind in development because you played h5 instead of castling. I'm not going to mate you, but I will crush you on the queenside. I had a game with Gareev like this that was very good for white. But like if black plays knight b d7, now it becomes much harder for him to play b5. For example, like, I don't know, after castle long, if b5 now... There's probably some kind of knight c6 in various positions to worry about. I don't know if it works here specifically, but yeah. Well, I could play maybe knight d5 and then, I don't know. So the way black played in the game, though, if like here, like let's say after h4, I mean, the plan is still to break through on the king side, but the only thing black can do to stop that would be to play h5. And now he's sort of arguing that if you were to leave the tension, he can take on g4, or if you take, he can take with the rook. And in both cases, his king is very happy in the center and can walk to f8, g8 if needed, while black's got good control over the h file and good counterplay. And here after g5, I don't necessarily think you're going to break through that easily, but black is going to suffocate under the space advantage. So for example, I don't even know where this knight wants to go. Let's say
would you follow up with like knight d5? Yeah, that's what I was going to ask.
So like say knight h7, knight d5, and I guess black probably has to play rook b8 to avoid a complete disaster on b6. And here white has any number of tempting possibilities. Bishop h3 looks like a thought, for example, when you cannot take it because of knight c6, you cannot castle because of bishop d7 and then knight c6. I don't know what this knight on h7 is doing. Eventually f4 and then e5 or f5 might come, and this looks like it's very bad. Another thing white can sometimes even do is in these structures is play king b1 and try to play c4 and open the c file, which is riskier, but in the right circumstances where like this rook on h8 and knight on h7 are not very scary attacking pieces, it could be done. In any case, any other questions on this game, or should we?
I think Josh had a question.
Josh, fire away.
Yeah. So you had mentioned that I had the opportunity to trade knights, bring the queen to d4, and then fork on e5. What did white have if I had done that immediately? Because in a quick time control, I missed it the first move, and then I got it.
By the way, this was a 10-minute game, so that
Okay, yeah, that probably explains a couple of things. So knight f4. The question is if you could have done this immediately. It's less convincing now because now after e5 takes and e takes f4, white can play g5 and he's going to win the piece back. Well, once you had played h takes g4, that was not really a thing anymore because he wouldn't have g5. And here, I don't know. I mean, this is still not easy. For example, after like, say, bishop e6, this is not the end of the story. Like this endgame, for example, I think is complete. In fact, I think black is much better in this endgame. He sticks the king on e5 and then goes f6, g5. But probably white shouldn't go for that. He can play queen takes f4. He can play queen e5. This is very messy, and I think white's in good shape. Like, for example, after queen f4, I don't see black.
Wait, can you go knight d7 here?
Queen f4, he can go knight d7. So I have to go queen e5. But then after, like, queen e7, for example, black is almost in stalemate. Like, if I play bishop h3 or something, I don't really know what black's next move is. And maybe white will play, like, rook d6, rook d1, and I don't know. It's very complicated, but I don't think white is doing badly. That makes sense.
Okay. Yeah, I wasn't sure in the fast-paced game, but then after that next move, I was pretty sure about it, so I played it.
Yeah, so here after knight f4, I think you probably should have taken on d4 and then played hg4 here, because if you start with h takes g4, then here he could have taken on c6 and then played h5, which I think is going to be extremely dangerous. For example, after something like bishop c6, h5, I guess you have to play g5 or else you'll probably get mated. And now, I don't know, knight d5 or something. And I don't think you want to allow queen g5. But if you play knight h7, then I just take this pawn back or something. And it's still very messy, but it's also very dangerous for you. But I think if you take here first, this is probably the way you want to do it. And this looks very good for black.
Okay. Yeah, I never knew that about the bishop d7, so that's interesting. Thank you.
Yeah. So, okay. So I guess other questions, or should we move on to the next game? All right. So I'm going to stop the share, kill this one, and then move on to Akash against Rohail. So this one, it looks like, started off as some kind of Dutch. Ooh, this is, I mean, playing d5, the whole point of the stone wall is that you end up getting a very good bishop coming to d6, attacking the king side. And if you compare this, like, for example, if we had played e3 and then d5, c4, c6, we could get, like, a position, like, for example, this position here would be pretty similar to one that I recommended for black recently in my Semi-Slav course. And black's going to go like bishop f6, knight d7, and bishop d6, knight d7. And it's hard for white because there's a lot of pressure on the king side. But basically here, black's position is strategically dubious and he needs kingside counterplay. And if his bishop can ever get shut down, he's not going to get it. So for example, after bishop e2, bishop d6, castles, knight b d7, let's say knight b d2. Here, I think black has to be very careful because I believe if white is able to get the move knight e5 in, he shuts down the bishop, and then the attack is over. So black should play queen f6 to prevent that. And sure, black is ready with g5, g4 now and can launch an attack. But the way black is playing this game is he's playing the same kind of setup, except in a situation where white's bishop is already on f4. So black has left himself with all these weak dark squares and potentially weakened kingside without getting the attacking prospects of having an unopposed black squared bishop on d6. So this, I think, should quickly be very good for white. Bishop d3 feels slow to me, but I would rather be more patient with this bishop and develop the knight first, but it doesn't really matter. And like, for example, here, this position already looks very difficult for black. white, for example, could have even taken on d5. I think I actually quite like taking on d5 for white now, because black cannot take back with the e-pawn, which would be your normal stonewall recapture thanks to bishop takes f5. If black takes back with the c-pawn, then after rook c1, white's obviously going to abuse the open c-file before black can do anything about it. So black would probably have to take with the knight, but this is a very structurally dubious move that he does not want to make, because now white is taking more space, and after something like bishop g3, and we're ready for like knight c4 and then knight fe5 and take over all the black squares, and there's no counterplay. I think cd5, this would have been a good moment for it, because after queen c2, knight e4, now if white were to take on d5, then black would be able to take back with the e-pawn without hanging on f5. All right, so h3, knight f6, rook fc1 is fine, although I would have thought knight e5 is more natural. White did go for knight e5, and now c5. And I don't love this decision. I think that white didn't need to resolve the tension so quickly. My instinct here would be to play the move bishop e2. This does a few things. It keeps any unwanted guests off of the h5 square, and it was pretty clear black was trying to do that to launch an attack, but it also clears the d3 square, so I can retreat my knight and trade off this bishop once and for all. And then, you know, if white can do something like this knight comes here, and then this knight comes there, and then this knight on e4. I mean, eventually white has this e5 outpost for his knight, while e4 is not nearly as secure for black, because at some point f3 will come. c5 probably isn't bad, but it feels impatient, and also I don't like it in connection with rook fc1, because now that move doesn't make much sense if we were going to close the c-file anyway. But okay, knight df3, and then king h8 is a bad decision, and knight g6 is an excellent response, because now white will take the black squared bishop, and this is already just horrible for black with knight e5 coming. And well, when you compare the quality of like these three pieces to these three pieces in particular, essentially here black has one good minor piece and two terrible ones, and the good one's about to get exchanged, and then white's going to be left with two good minor pieces. So now white, I mean, I guess took on f4. I mean, I would think that you should take on e4 with the clean pawn up, but taking f4 is probably fine too. And here the e4 pawn is going to fall, and we can see the stark difference on display between the quality of black's bishop and the quality of white's knight. So e3 chop, and now queen e2 is a good move. And like here, if this bishop could like get to e4, fine, then we'd talk, but it has no way to do anything remotely active. It can't even get off the back rank, so that like when white plays rook f1, he will take over the f-file. And essentially here it seems like black ended up, okay, have a good one, Logan. Essentially here it looks like black ended up with a strategic disaster and not getting any of the benefit for it. And so here, like, again, this bishop on b7 is very bad. White's a clean pawn up. Knight f7 check was maybe not totally necessary, but it also looks very strong. Go kick this bishop. And then here, white went for queen f1 check, which is surely fine, although I would have thought. Okay, so here white can go take that bishop, for example, or knight e8 is played is also not bad. I guess black has to play h6 to save his king, but this looks horrible. Instead, got mated in one move. Yes, so this was a pretty clean, crisp, and strong positional win from white that I think can be very proud of. For black, I would say you got a very ugly position in the opening because you played the stonewall in a situation where you were not able to get an unopposed dark squared bishop, which left you with all of your typical stonewall weaknesses and none of your typical stonewall counterplay. That's not a recipe for success. So yeah, with that in mind, I'd like to go ahead and stop the share, take a look at the next game unless there are any questions. But first, I'm going to pour myself a glass of water because I talk too much. Okay, so it looks like no further questions. So I'm going to stop the share here and move on. Going to go to Ben against Noah is the next game that we have. So I'm going to share the screen. And we have, okay, so this started off as a French, which is, well, we got this Rubinstein position, and I think white's knight, I don't like knight takes f6 check from white because I think white's biggest asset here is that he has a little bit more space, and that means we want less trades. Now, we do have to deal with the threat to the knight on e4, but like if white were instead to play bishop f6, let's say black plays bishop f6 back. Here, I think that the knight on e4 is probably a little bit better than the bishop on f6. The bishop is sort of blunted, doesn't have anywhere great to go, and no great way to break it out. And if you were to take on f6, you would be accelerating black's development because he could take with the queen and get a new piece out. So, so here after knight f6 and bishop f6, white is sort of, we've got a situation where black is now sort of ahead in development because his queen is out and white doesn't have any pieces out, and as a result, I'm not thrilled with this decision. So bishop d3, bishop d7 is, I guess, kind of clever. Now d4 is hanging, but I mean, I think white would be a knucklehead to let you take it. I'm wondering if black can, my instinct would be not to play bishop d7. I think that probably the knight belongs there in some cases. Black could consider, for example, castling here. And, well, it's not so easy for white to complete development. For example, after knight f3, let's say black plays c5 and tries to break down white's pawn center. You don't really want to take the pawn because then black will take b2 and leave white with a very bad structure. But it's kind of annoying to deal with it because, like, I don't know what else to do. If you castle and black plays rook d8, he's just going to increase the pressure further. And it's not so easy to hang on to the d4 pawn. If c3, black can take it. Now, if you take with the knight, there will be e5 followed by e4, winning material. And if you take with the pawn, there will be knight c6, also winning material. So I think that black could have put a lot more pressure on this d4 pawn if he had simply castled and got ready for c5. Because here, now that c5 is not coming, I think white's sort of alive. But at this point, I'm not sure I like castles. I would rather break down white's center directly with e5 and not let him have a chance to keep it together. I don't think that black is concerned about a move like queen e2 because after castle long, you're not going to be able to hold this together. I mean, here black gets the piece back and all of his pieces are jumping to life very quickly, and this is no bueno. Basically here, I believe that since black has given up his right to play c5, that he needs to play e5. And in general, if you ever play knight c3 with white or knight c6 with black, blocking in your c-pawn, the only way you can justify that is by playing the move e5 with black or e4 with white. And here, black has blocked the c-pawn. Now, I don't think that was a great decision, but I think that he'd still be at least fine if he breaks down the center with e5 here. But instead, castle short feels like the wrong strategy to me because now white will be able to stop him from getting e5 through. So here, queen c2, but like if white had played rook e1, for example, I think that black's not going to get e5. Queen c2 is fine though. h6, rook e1, rook d8, I guess that's fine. Rook a d1, knight e7, and knight e5. Yeah, and basically here, black sort of lost a lot of time bringing his knight from c6 to e7, which I don't think was really where the knight wanted to go. And now white has prevented c5, has consolidated his extra space, and has a pretty nice position. So there follows knight d5, and now knight g4, I think, is a very big step in the wrong direction for white, because this knight on e5 is a very good piece. I would play g3 here to limit that knight on d5, and then aim to slowly but surely expand in the coming moves. For example, my plan would be to play a3 to control the b4 square, and then c4 to kick this knight away. And once the knight's gone, I can consider rook e3, rook f3 to put more pressure on black's position. And this seems quite difficult for black to me. But knight g4 feels impatient, as now the knight was on a very good square, and now coming backwards like this is a step in the wrong direction. And immediately black tried to punish with the move knight f4. And if we think about what's going on here, what I would have liked to play g3 stopping knight f4. Not only did white let knight f4 come, but he also did so while leaving the knight on e5 and bringing it back to e3. And the knight on e5 was not only a good attacking piece, but it was also a good defensive one because it was preventing bishop c6. And now all of a sudden when bishop c6 comes, it might become quite difficult to secure the king side. I don't think white's worse just yet, but you know, he's sort of in full-on retreat mode. I mean, I think here he should have played bishop e4 to try to secure this diagonal before black can abuse it. But after bishop f1 and bishop c6, now we're starting to see some serious threats piling up on the white against the king side. So g3 is a good decision, and now h5. And here I hope white played h4. But no, knight h3. That's knight g2. That's a very bad sign. I think white could have turned the tables here with h4. And now I think black's actually in big trouble because the queen has to move, and she has to also make sure not to allow g takes f4 to come. So if the queen were to go anywhere except for g6, gf4 would come. And after queen g6, now white can breathe a big sigh of relief by exchanging the queens. So now he's not going to get mated, and in addition to not getting mated after bishop e2, he's going to go eat the h5 pawn, and well, he will be a clean pawn up. So I think this would have worked very nicely. Instead of h4, it looks like white played knight g2, and now after knight h3 check, black's attack is very, very powerful. And for example, if black were to play the move, what did black played h4, which is fine. But if black had played bishop f3, I guess we would have to play rook d3 and say something like queen g4. I have absolutely no idea how white wants to untangle his pieces. He cannot, like, look, he can't move the knight. He can't move the bishop because of knight f2. He can't move the king to defend that pawn. He can't, I don't see like a legal move for white to make. It's very hard to suggest anything. And bishop e4 is a threat. And this could get very, very bad very fast. h4 is not bad, but at least here I think white could have played f4 and kicked black's queen back just a little bit. It still looks horrible for white, but maybe there's better defensive chances. Instead, after queen d2, so black went queen f6. I'm wondering if he can do something more violent, but probably not. Actually, I see a very nice move for black here. I like this move, bishop f3. This attacks the rook on d1, and the rook cannot move away because then the queen will hang. But what happens if white takes the queen on g5? What should black play now? It's a very nice idea. Anybody see a good move for black? Yes, good, Rick, that's correct. We want to take on f2. A nice in-between move, king g1, knight h3, check back, and now and only now we take the queen. And at this point, black is already a pawn up. He is threatening this rook. He is threatening h3. And while white survived the immediate attack, he's obviously dead lost in the endgame as he's down one pawn and about to lose an exchange as well. So that, I think, looks like a very clean way to bring the game to its conclusion. I mean, maybe black can go give mate, but this also looks very, very easy as it immediately forces a winning endgame. Instead, black played queen f6, which also looks really good because it's very hard to defend the f2 pawn. White tried f4, but now after hg and queen h6. Yeah, so basically, if we think about what went wrong for white, it all came down to piece activity. The rooks on d1 and e1 and d8 and e8 have stayed the same for a while. But if we consider what had happened previously, at some point here, what happened was this knight went back to g2, this bishop went back to f1, and then this knight went to f4 and h3, and then this bishop went to c6. It's very clear which direction all of these pieces are going. It's forward for black and backwards for white. So, and that's where I think things went badly wrong. And if white had kept his pieces on their currently strong posts, then white would have retained a good position. My guess is after g3, he's much better. I'll just ask what the computer has to say, and then we will move on. What does Big Bad Stockfish think? It says g3 and white is winning. Winning. Apparently, there were bishop h7 check and rook d3 was even stronger. Yeah, I mean, this is... I like bishop e4 is a clever move. I like this one. This is the most human. Rook d3, rook f3 coming, and black's position falls apart. g3, as I wanted, also seems extremely powerful. But knight g4 and knight e3, this is the start of things going wrong. And then, as the pieces go backwards. And yes, here, as I pointed out, H4 was the last chance, and then white was good. But after knight G2, this is getting very bad very fast. In any case, so a good game, very instructive, but it all came down to that piece activity and that white brought his pieces all the way back and black brought the pieces forward. So I don't think we have time to go over any other games, but so for the last little bit, I would just like to open it up for general question and answer, and I will do my best to share my brilliant wisdom with you. Of course, I don't actually have any brilliant wisdom, but I know a couple things. For what it's worth, this is the last session I have agreed to do with Russ. Now we're talking about doing more, and I certainly hope we can. But these 8 weeks have been great, and I just want to, in addition to questions, I'm also open to feedback from you guys. If there's anything that you think I did well and you would like me to do more of in the future, or anything you think I did poorly or that I suck at that I need to improve upon in the future. So if anyone has any questions or feedback, I'm open to hear it. Any questions? You can, if you want to ask a question, you can type it in, or you can just turn on your microphone and talk. But if you're going to ask it out loud, make sure to turn on your microphone first.
Is there a specific game that stands out a lot to you? Like a game that you played that was like really brilliant or something? And if you do, maybe if you could link it in the chat.
Yeah, I mean, I've played some good games in my life. I mean, one of my favorite one, I think, would be the one that won me the U.S. championship. It was, a huge amount of pressure, $50,000 on the line, and I just played a very, very good game and cleanly put away a Wonder Liang. Could link that one here. I very much liked my win over Judith Polgar at the Olympiad in what turned out to be her last ever game of chess. And I liked also beating Kramnik in what turned out to be his last game of chess. Let's see. Can link in the chat here.
I also thought your hours were very instructive. Thank you for coming and sharing it with us.
Oh, my pleasure. I'm hopeful that people learned something from what I had to say and that I wasn't just talking out my ears. But yeah, or nose, whatever you want to say. Shouldn't finish that sentence. Let me. And then the last one I would say was my game with Kramnik here, where I don't know. It's always special to beat a world champion. I've only gotten to play 3 games against current or past world champions, and Kramnik was the only one that I won. The other 2 were draws. And beating somebody who was once #1 in the world, and that was a point of pride for me. And Kramnik was one of my heroes growing up, and I was proud to have beaten him. Okay, other questions?
No. When did you decide to have a career in chess?
So basically, I started chess late. So I played my first tournament when I was 11, which is probably about the same age as you guys are now. Some of you are a little older, some of you are a little younger. And so a lot of you are like, 2000 or whatever when you're 10 years old, and I was 0. So I was always playing catch up. And I got pretty good at chess, but I was never like the best kid for my age group. But then when I was a senior in high school, I won the California State Championship, the adult section. As I was the youngest ever. And then right after that, I went off to the World Youth and tied for first in the under 18 division. And I thought, at that point, I'm pretty good at this game. And my grades are terrible, so I should, maybe give chess a try because I suck at everything else. Other questions?
What's your rating?
Not very high. I dropped a ton last year I had a horrible year personally for a lot of reasons, but the mark of a true champion is to go through a tough time and still maintain a high level of play. And that was a test that I absolutely failed last year, and something I need to work on in increasing psychological toughness. But yeah, I'm 2691 FIDE, which every time I say that out loud, I just want to vomit. At my peak, I was like 2730 something, which is, I think, about how strong I am. But well, the onus is on me to prove it because I dropped, and I need to get the rating back to make any kind of claim like that again. Okay, let's see. We have time for one more question.
How many hours do you train a day?
I try to average about 4. But my goal is for my training hours to be extremely focused, efficient, and intense. And I would much rather have 4 really good quality, intense training hours than 8 lackadaisical or distracted ones. If you want to do 8 hours a day of intense brain work, just forget it. You're going to fry your head. It's impossible. And so I can do that from time to time. Like if I have my coach staying with me in California, I'll do 8-hour days for a week or something. But you can't do that for too long, or your brain is just going to be fried. It also depends a little bit what you qualify as training. So for example, I go to the gym. Well, not now, I don't, because everything's locked down, but I exercise rigorously every day, which is not technically chess training, but it is important for my overall physical health, which is needed for chess tournaments. And yeah, it depends, but I'd say I'd probably average about 4 hours a day. All right. So anyhow, thanks all this was a really fun 8 weeks. Russ and I are still talking about having some other stuff in the works. I'm not sure when that will start, but it was a pleasure working with all of you, and I wish all of you the very best for your chess careers in the future. And yeah, I hope I get to see you guys in New York again. Probably not this summer because I doubt everything will be back, but maybe next summer.
Okay. Thank you so much, Sam.
All right. Have a good day, everybody. Bye-bye.
For all your help.
What did you say?
Like,
Have a good day. See you.